This week's episode was brought to you by Rachel Ice and Kyle. Thank you, Rachel Ice and Kyle. It's with the generous support of listeners like you that keeps our subversive reality hacking, ontology sabotaging, batshit crazy assault on consensus reality stocked with enough carrots and lasers to keep repelling the onslaught of soul-crushing monotony that feeds on toenails and bad feelings. If you'd like to help us keep the fuzzy, bad-feeling monster who eats toenails back into the butt-smelling dimension from whence he came, or just hear the second half of this episode, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only make you a member of an elite squad of cosmic Easter egg hunters, you'll also get the extended version of this episode, along with access to our entire frickin' library of binge-worthy episodes in their long play format, available for convenient browsing right within your Spotify app after you sign in and stuff. But that's not all. I'll send you an additional 5x5 high quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art at no additional cost to you, and you'll even get the secret keys to our Discord server, which is a growing rabble of rabbits who research the requirements for rewriting reality. Say that 10 times fast, mother goose! If you bodied this year's tax return and have a rabbit hole burning in your pocket, or just want the best damn deal for online tarot reading anywhere on the internet, then check out our $20 tier, where you can get a monthly tarot reading from yours truly. You'll even get a bonus limited edition sticker, which you can boast about to your cat, who will be envious. On this week's episode, we follow our guide Heka Astra into the rarely explored yet vitally important philosophical conundrum of what it means to be free, and if such a thing is even possible, by exploring turn-of-the-century occultist Rudolph Steiner's seminal classic on the subject, The Philosophy of Freedom, which, to the delight of the spiritually minded, explains in albeit exhaustive detail the inner and outer workings of perception, will, thought, and even if or how we may express our supposed God-given right to freedom. In the free side of the show, get it? We discuss what freedom even is, if it has anything to do with choice or not, and what will has to do with the suit of wands in the tarot. That is its classical association most of the time. In the extended show, we discuss the formation of the ego, the effect observation has on both light and our thoughts. We even yell about physics for a while, and Einstein and stuff, and the esoteric symbolism of the sword in the Hermetic tradition, as it pertains to Steiner's explanation of thought. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the show. I was trying to think of jokes about philosophy, but it turns out I just can't. I held a job interview where the applicant said they studied philosophy at school. I said, was it useful? She said, I don't know, was it?
I'm too stupid for that one.
You know why you can't teach a stallion philosophy?
Why?
Because you can't put the cart before the horse.
Okay, I got that.
What's a degree in philosophy good for?
Nothing?
Thinking deep thoughts about being unemployed.
You know, people ask me if it's hard to adopt nihilism as a personal philosophy. I tell them there's nothing to it.
Good.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just tell you that the universe is fundamentally nothing but cold, dead matter ultimately forced into configuration by the starting conditions of the universe itself, making it such that every decision you could ever perceive as making was little more than a pathetic illusion, which would immediately vanish under the scrutiny of a large enough supercalculator, where one could accurately predict all phenomena as if it were bound inexorably by the rigid hand of deterministic natural law. Nay, we attacked the black iron calculator with the ontology-shattering reasoning of Rudolph Steiner and prove once and for all that freedom is not a mere delusion, but the central, most important aspect of what it means to be human, because this week we're discussing The Philosophy of Freedom by, well, the Austrian occultist and philosopher Rudolph Steiner.
Yay!
I'm your host, Hack Rabbit, also known as Luke Madrid. I'm joined this week by our co-hosts, the miraculous mentalist from the moon, Marisama.
That's one small step for a rabbit, one giant hop for rabbit kind.
And the historically accurate heretic, Heka Astra.
Hello. I'm stoked that we're doing this because I've been bugging Luke since I joined the podcast to do this particular book.
Hoo-hoo!
I really like this book.
Hey, maybe we can do Killer 7 next. Just kidding.
I am still not familiar with it.
That's mine that I've been badgering him forever for.
I'll admit, reading this sometimes makes me a bit cross-eyed, and Steiner has that flourish that only a German or Austrian thinker could have. He's really got his pinky in the air as he takes a bite of sauerkraut. He sort of explains everything to death, so it's good that we're going to go through it and kind of explain it like freedom for dummies. Myself being the dummy, if you will.
Yeah, I had to go through it numerous times, like especially if I didn't understand something, I'd have to read it over and over again. And then there were some parts you get to where he would have like ready to go 15 examples of like what other philosophers would say and like different scenarios to explain what he was talking about. I'm like, okay, I get it.
It can be a little bit arduous to read. I think that's why it's also so important to cover this as an episode, because it makes it more accessible for people that, you know, they start to read it and then they give up on reading it. But it has a lot of, I think, very interesting and important things to say. You know, I love reading texts like that, but it can at times be almost as inaccessible and wordy and flowery as someone like Crowley. Crowley's a bit like that, or Austin Osman Spare, where you're kind of like, oh, what the fuck is he saying?
Its strength is its weakness in so much as it gets so into the bones of what freedom is on an ontological level that it extends the discussion into the realms of the occult. And in terms of essays about freedom from occultists, if we look at Jack Parsons, Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword is markedly less occult in its content than this essay. So this essay by Rudolph Steiner, The Philosophy of Freedom, is actually perfect for us here at The Whole Rabbit.
It parallels and overlaps with so many different areas of interest for the topics that we usually cover.
It's relevant to all the occult topics we cover, and it's presented in a way that is also esoteric in itself. So to get us started, so on a conversation level, what is freedom? What do you, dear co-hosts, what do you consider freedom?
Well, immediately when you ask that question, what comes to mind for me is from chapter 1, line 41 of the Book of the Law. It states, "The word of sin is restriction, O man." That's essentially freedom in a nutshell. So those are from the Holy Book of Thelema, carrying that underlying connection between the concept of freedom and the concept of true will, or Thelema.
Thelema is inherently freedom-pilled, you're saying?
Yep. And whether you're a Thelemite or not, I think this context is really accurate for what is being portrayed. So again, there's going to be a lot of overlap with the concept of Thelema, but it's not Thelema specific. But if we follow this thread with Thelema, in that particular line, it continues to read, "Refuse not thy wife," which is not a literal statement, but more so a sentiment of the will's function, which requires a kind of openness. So we're talking about energetic principles. The environment which the will requires in order to functionally exist and act is an open environment, or one that does not refuse that feminine receptive nature of one's individual union. So to simplify it, it's like saying the will needs negative space or open space, which we might define as freedom, for it to exist and act.
Now, without looking ahead, where Steiner will probably prove me wrong, my idea of freedom sounds a lot like what you just said. Hear me out. Freedom, at least to me, is acting within one's inspiration, and as a political concept, allowing people to do this as much as possible.
Right. I think the technical definition of what freedom means is a lack of restriction. And for me, it is for this reason that the concept of freedom is deeply entwined with the nature of love. So as Grandma might have told you at one point, if you love something, set it free. The concept of freedom ties into this energetically feminine ability to embrace, but also to hold open, hold space for. A hand needs to be opened in order to hold an object. The opposite to this would be akin to picking a flower using a closed fist. The fingers must be free to open and close for that function to occur, according to the will of the flower picker.
Love has to be a choice, or it's not really love if it's forced. So that makes sense. There has to be some openness, some receptivity, and some freedom.
And freedom implies the inalienable state of natural receptivity to be done with as the individual desires. Like a cup that is not yet to be filled except by the one whose cup it is to fill as they will. This alone unfolds into a pretty deep discussion regarding the will. Freedom is something which may be observed in a manifest form, but it is also a concept deserving of the philosophical considerations that Steiner presents. It's a concept highly highly applicable to the physical world, but also to the spiritual. And Steiner had a particular penchant for bridging that divide between realms like science and spirituality.
Well, that is good because love is a huge component of freedom. Like, I don't think that you could have it, or you'll have some flawed version of freedom if you're not acting out of love.
Absolutely.
The receptive quality of both love and freedom makes a lot of sense to me, because if you just give someone 10 options and they don't want any of those options and they're not free or able to pursue the thing that they love or want or inspired by, it's not really freedom. And that thing that they want or inspired by, they have to be receptive to it in the first place. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, or they might have the option to refuse all of the choices. But at the same time, the way that time works kind of end up being pigeonholed into choosing something, you know?
That topic of openness to be able to close, it comes up again later on as we go through the text. It'll definitely come up again as being relevant to specific points.
Because sometimes the only freedom you have, or the only way to assert your will in a certain situation, is to say no.
Yep. But aside from that, I think more fundamentally to me, freedom is having control over one's own actions and over your choice to exercise your free will. And so I was like reading a little bit about like the definition of free will. It's the capacity or ability of an individual to choose between different possible courses of action, regardless of determinism or the concept of fate. That is a choice to act independent of natural law playing out to only one possible path, such as personal autonomy, self-determinism, the ability to introspect upon one's own values and act upon them despite any outside influence from things such as your own instincts, natural laws, and others' influence upon you.
See, that's a big list. So big is this list, it leaves a lot of room for consideration that we're going to be touching on as we go.
Yeah, because the more I picked at it, the more I'm like, well, what really is it?
Yeah.
Because there are some theories that say that even though we can think and introspect and make these decisions of our free will, it doesn't mean that our choice actually changes anything about how the universe actually plays out over time. Like when people talk about fate, like you can't change fate, or people that believe that we don't have free will. That's determinism, and it's basically all locked up in the material world and how, you know, physical laws like cause and effect. They think everything is down to basically entropy. Freedom to them is an illusion that we're just experiencing the universe going through entropy and becoming more complex. So while I do believe there can be a high probability certain events will naturally play out, and you can loosely calculate this, but I strongly believe that how we perceive, think, and react to these events actually changes the trajectory of the arrow of time in external reality. And like we often discuss on the show, there's something to be said about consciousness itself and how it tends to interact or even change outcomes in an experimental setting. Like Schrödinger's cat, we talked about this so many times. The simple presence of an observer in that experiment can literally change where an electron is in an experiment. And then think about if you have more than one sentient I or ego observing that event, that could possibly compound the effect of the observers on these tiny quantum changes. So we don't really know or can measure how much it affects reality, but I do know for sure that it does because it can be shown. We can't really go back in time and measure to what degree, like I said, but it's the same reason that the observer cannot observe the observer, like how you can't think about yourself thinking at any given time. But to assume consciousness or personal will absolutely does not affect the universe as it unfolds moment to moment doesn't really make sense to me at all.
Okay, now hold on a minute. What if consciousness does affect the universe, but the fact that your consciousness affected the universe was already determined to happen based on the laws of the universe already? So there. Yeah.
Well, then there really is no need for consciousness to exist. There probably would be none. There's so many reasons that I don't want to get into right now, but I could explain why I think that. But the material world, the perception of it, and even the experience of time and space, to me, all boils down to consciousness. So I view freedom as requiring consciousness as fundamental, with the added ability of sentience, which sentience is the awareness, the ability to self-reflect, and to understand inner thought and your own will, which is separate from subconscious urges, like instincts, automatic reactions, like if you touch a hot stove and you jump back. Sometimes even emotions can be considered a subconscious reaction. To me, one is not free unless they are able to follow their true will. Even when we are coerced by others, either by persuasion or force, there is always the option of resisting, like we just mentioned, even if only in your mind. You're able to to exercise your free will even in the most hopeless of situations. And sadly, some people never seem to have a free will because they simply don't exercise it. They either don't realize or don't have the capacity to know that there's another choice, and they resign themselves to automatically accept fate as it unfolds without their input, or they can also be goaded into believing that another person or group's choice of action is actually their own, and they're willing themselves to do something when in reality they have only been trained by others to do something. How you train a dog or an animal. You wouldn't say that that's the dog's will to do that. It's been trained to do that.
And so there's some ambiguity. Is freedom real? It certainly feels like it is. But on some level, is it an illusion? And if it is an illusion, does that make it any less valuable? There's lots of potential ways to define freedom. And as Steiner points out, much discussion revolves around determining if such a lofty ideal even exists at all. Rudolph Steiner existed during a time when his straightforward, logical, yet approachable brand of philosophy earned him the personal wrath of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, Hitler was not a fan of Steiner's.
They got into a personal beef. The Philosophy of Freedom was published in 1894 under its German name, Die Philosophie der Freiheit, while in the English world, where it was remarkably popular, it was published as The Philosophy of Spiritual Activity, or alternatively, The Philosophy of Freedom, an intuitive thinking as spiritual path.
I should just point out now that there's also, I believe, a few different versions of it because it's a text that he felt the need to go back and clarify several times. And so depending on what version you have, you might have a lot more pages. And this might also be where if you get one of the later ones, it might actually be even more exhaustive than one of the original versions because he felt the need to go back and tweak it over and over again so that people wouldn't misunderstand him.
When you read the introduction to those new versions, he says that he fundamentally hasn't changed his mind. He just wants to clarify what he said, and that the philosophy of freedom is foundational for the understanding of the works that would follow. From this, we may deduce that not only is this an essay about freedom, it contains at its core a spiritual element, which extends into esoteric dimensions of thought, but concludes in a way that can be understood by your average Joe, or in this case, Johann. And so Heka Astra's leading the attack on this particular episode, and we're going to be covering chapters 1 through 4, putting a little more emphasis on some things rather than others. It can be a bit redundant at times.
Every once in a while, we might have to point out some nuanced point, so it might sound like a bit of repetition, but with purpose.
To kick things off in chapter 1 and approach the issue directly, Steiner invokes Herbert Spencer, a prominent proponent of determinism, who argued for an essentially materialist explanation for psychology. This is a good place to start because this perspective was developing into a popular outlook then and remains firmly entrenched as the default perspective today.
Quote, that everyone is at liberty to desire or not to desire, which is the real proposition involved in the dogma of free will, is negatived as much by the analysis of consciousness as by the contents of the preceding chapter, unquote.
If only you had read my book, you would know that the dogma of free will is, well, it's quite silly. For Spencer, freedom comes down to the ability to decide one's desires, and thus make choices based on that, I guess. But as he says, any real analysis shows that this falls apart under any real scrutiny. Steiner is bringing Spencer's perspective up, essentially, to illustrate that this vastly popular outlook relies on a straw man argument, meaning Steiner believes Spencer defined freedom wrongly before attacking it to death. In essence, the argument is delivered upon the wrong target in the wrong way.
Basically, Spencer got the concept of freedom wrong from the get-go, that the argument made which followed it has no stable ground to stand on.
And I'll admit, this really intuitively at first seems like what freedom is. It's like the ability to choose the blue pill or the red pill, but quite a bit has been said about that's not really it. And we're, I guess, going to get into it. To explain, Spencer is saying that supposedly free choices between options, in this case, let's say pizza or tacos, the only choice that really matters, is secretly determined by an immutable chain of cause and effect, which, despite whatever testament of our senses of experience, is totally and utterly inviolable. That every decision or action ever taken, including by you, inside of you, was long ago, from the very beginning, determined by laws which govern the natural universe. This is basically what determinism is. It's all billiard balls, and it's all already moving. It can all be predicted. You just need a big enough calculator.
Which is important to keep in mind, since the circumstances that determinism is rooted in does have a place in the considerations that follow throughout this essay, but it is not the be-all end-all point to be made.
Like, we know that there's like 5 or 6 Neos, and he always chooses the red pill.
You are a slave.
I've also heard some people argue that there would have to be no free will or determinism for God to exist and be omniscient, which obviously is a dumb argument, but it's used for all sorts of things, this determinism proposition.
So it's here that Steiner points out that this type of thinking finds its footing upon works like Baruch Spinoza, who, despite holding a position that he will eventually attack, also introduces a limited edition version of freedom that Steiner will then modify, develop, and uplift into something closer to actual freedom. Steiner quotes Spinoza's definition of freedom.
Freedom, or is it, as defined by Spinoza, quote, I call a thing free which exists and acts from the pure necessity of its nature, and I call that unfree, of which the being and action are precisely and fixedly determined by something else. Thus, for example, God, though necessary, is free because he exists only through the necessity of his own nature. Similarly, God cognizes himself and all else freely because it flows solely from the necessity of his nature that he cognizes all. You see, therefore, that for me, freedom consists not in free decision, but in free necessity, unquote.
Well, what the hell does that mean? And what is the free necessity?
So when Spinoza speaks of the necessity of something's nature, it is in a way restricting freedom's nature itself. And this is because the nature of freedom here is being defined only by the ability to choose an act. The ability to choose is then defined by a system of what is necessary to the individual. So, for example, I need to go to the fridge to eat something. This necessitates the actions that are consequently connected to the choice of what food I will eat. Contrary to this, that which is unfree is then by default whatever might restrict that process. So this would be like someone not allowing you to go to the fridge.
Oh,
Or deciding for you what to eat.
that's like in the future when you have a weight loss robot.
Please, no.
No? No what?
No, you may not eat that.
You start making a Subway sandwich, just comes over just like, bah! And then as you're cleaning it up, keeps
Out of your
track
hand.
of how many calories you're burning as you clean it up off the ground, and then awards you stars for it.
Well, it doesn't make sense, because what's the first thing your significant other will say when you say, where do you want to go to eat?
Oh, anywhere's fine. You choose.
So Spinoza's idea of freedom that's presented here, it lacks any true depth of an individual's conscious and willful awareness, though it does acknowledge the manifest nature of free will, but it appears to lack deeper substance regarding the will and freedom.
It's like Freedom Limited Edition. All the features are secretly locked behind a paywall. It's really Freedom Light. You know what I mean? It's not really freedom.
Yeah.
Is restricted freedom really freedom?
Okay, but even if you took the weight loss robot out of the living room, Spinoza's still saying all your decisions have been decided at some point somewhere else. It's just now you don't have the burden of the subjective experience of having your freedom be inhibited. But essentially, that's also an illusion. Your freedom is always inhibited because Spinoza's a determinist.
Yeah, he's essentially saying freedom isn't real. And the perspective of Spinoza's quote, it also fails to really define what constitutes necessity. Spinoza basically says that necessity, if unrestrained in its expressions, is freedom. But if we took a completely material approach to this commentary, then the spiritual or integral essence of the soul may not be viewed at all as a necessity.
You don't need art. All you need is a cave, some fire, and some meat.
And Steiner would, of course, reject this kind of deterministic version of necessity as being void itself of a necessary component of the individual. Substantial personal values that reside at the core of our beings are subject to and greatly influenced by the individual's perspective of what exactly constitutes the idea or the concept of necessity.
Cheese.
Like, what one person thinks of as necessity may not be the same thing as another person thinks of as necessity. So, he fails to even define what that means.
Going fast in a car.
Because of this lack of substance in Spinoza's free necessity, it is fixed and it depends on external forces to dictate it. It assumes a somewhat limiting idea of the individual, where the individual's choices are predetermined by that individual's programming. So that's the collective events of the past that made you the person you are today, and you're just following that programming.
Yeah, no matter
Steiner
how much.
notes this as a kind.
Yeah, no matter how many times Neo gets recreated inside the Matrix, he always picks the red pill.
So Steiner notes this as a kind of freedom that only exists as being fixed and determined by external factors. Assuming this and nothing else, we might as well just assume that no matter how consciously aware we might be, the individual is never more than an automaton and byproduct of their internalized processes of the external forces that they've experienced. So if freedom was as narrow a concept as that, then we could just boil it all down to meaning that every single one of us is ultimately just an NPC.
Yeah, and if you take that even further, then AI can be considered an actual person.
I think AI will be good to keep in mind because based on what Steiner is saying, it's possible that AI may already be, quote, free or have free will in some form or function, but we're not there yet. Just to wrap things up about what Steiner's getting at with Spinoza's immensely popular outlook is Spinoza inherently does not believe in freedom. And what limited existence he affords freedom is being able to act in accordance with one's own nature, which is just a little bit better than being able to choose between it puts the lotion on its skin or it gets the hose again, which all of the radical anti-capitalists and anti-cosmic Gnostics in our Discord will appreciate as being the sort of freedom that we normally have here in the material universe. So for Spinoza, there's just varying degrees of unfreedom, and Steiner, like many of us, may take issue with that.
Quote, Spinoza and all who think like him overlook the fact that man not only is conscious of his action, but also may become conscious of the causes which guide him. Should the act of a soldier on the field of battle, of the scientific researcher in his laboratory, of the statesman in the most complicated diplomatic negotiations, be placed scientifically on the same level with that of the child when it desires milk, there is, after all, a profound difference between knowing why I am acting and not knowing it, unquote.
Well, that seems straightforward enough.
And he continues on, quote, according to Edward von Hartmann, is that even though we ourselves first adopt a mental picture as a motive, we do so not arbitrarily, but according to the necessity of our characterological disposition. That is, we are anything but free, unquote.
So he's saying, the universe will give you lots of things to think about and lots of moral codes to live by, but only the ones that resonate with you are going to stick. And those things that stick are based on your character sheet, if you're a gamer. Or basically, your psychological
your personality.
Profile. Yeah, I don't remember, but I believe it was Aristotle who said, your genius is your fate, which kind of makes sense because you have to be receptive to your genius, and that's the feminine component to that part. And I like that because it puts that receptive responsibility on the person to be able to meet their inspiration halfway. Because like I said, if you're not able to follow your inspiration, in America, we call it the pursuit of happiness, because we're trying to chase down that idea in that document, in a way that makes sense. But even still, all those things, right? Things that make you happy, the things that inspire you, those are still determined by your character sheet to some extent, aren't they? Right? So
yeah, that ties in a bit to something that we've brought up before on the show. If your natal chart is like a character sheet, there still exists the free will to consciously acknowledge your personal starting stats and adapt, refine, level up, or change classes as you choose. There's no law that's holding you to absolute adherence to these beginning stats, despite what von Hartmann might say. This is similar to the point that Steiner will make throughout this work, where we're able to be mindfully aware of those stats and why exactly they are what they are. When we have that awareness, we are affording ourselves not only their awareness, but an open space for which to exercise options that we give ourselves. The limitations are not dependent on the external, but rather internally, as we define those extent of options, as you might call them. And just to speak directly to the Edward von Hartmann quote, How could free will even exist if we are not free ourselves, since our thoughts are apparently just simple byproducts of the experiences that programmed us to think them in the first place? And this can be very dangerous territory to tread on when attempting to define what constitutes freedom. And not only that, but this version of freedom is further stunted by neglecting to acknowledge the important role that conscious awareness plays throughout the layers of these determinations and acting upon them.
See, yeah, because let's say you want to change something. Is it possible that the thing that you want to change was already determined by the initial starting conditions somewhere back in the chain of cause and effect? That simply because you cannot see it, you believe yourself free? You're nothing but a puppet? But why? Why would anyone make it this way?
Who made it this way? We know we didn't make it this way, yet here we are, subject to it. Every episode of The Whole Rabbit is just an advertisement for basic return to monkey Gnosticism.
So Steiner writes, quote, "Another form of expression runs, to be free does not mean to be able to want as one wills, but to be able to do as one wills. This thought has been expressed with great clearness by the poet-philosopher Robert Hammerling.
Man can certainly do as he wills, but he cannot want what he wills because his wanting is determined by motives. He cannot want as he wills? Let us consider these phrases more closely. Have they any intelligible meaning? Freedom of will would then mean being able to want without ground, without motive. But what does wanting mean if not to have grounds for doing or trying to do this rather than that? To want something without ground or motive would be to want something without wanting it. The concept of wanting cannot be divorced from the concept of motive. Without a determining motive, the will is an empty faculty. Only through the motive does it become active and real. It is therefore quite true that human will is not free, inasmuch as its direction is always determined by the strongest motive. But on the other hand, it must be admitted that it is absurd, in contrast with this unfreedom, to speak of a conceivable freedom of the will, which would consist in being able to want what one does not want."
Unquote.
So I just wanted to throw a quick comment in here because you know how people get confused about thelema and the difference between wanting and free will. So in my opinion, wanting can be disconnected from like a more deeper sourced conscious or divine will, but true will is connected to want. And I think I've heard Thelemites explain this as basically when you discover your true will, your wants become in line with your will.
Yeah, I mean, I've wanted something without knowing why. Like, there's no motive. I just feel very strongly towards it.
But let's say
You didn't want to want something. You can't want to change what you want unless you wanted to, which is just following more wants. You see? You can't remove
Yeah.
it. You can't change what you want unless you wanted to change it. So it's like, it's really hard to unseparate the will from the want, so much so that if you did, it cuts right to the heart of like, what even is freedom? Like, what even is it?
But while you can't separate necessarily will from want, you can separate want from will because want can be unconscious, it can be animalistic, it can be disconnected from a deeper meaning or deeper motive that would require it. So, like, at least with thelema, it's explained that your desires become more in line with a higher purpose.
And I think Steiner's going to elucidate in his own way without the Aleister Crowley sauce. I'm sorry for putting that image in your head.
Ugh.
Would mean by do as thou wilt, like what his own version of what Crowley was talking about, essentially. All things considered, I thought it would be appropriate to see how the issue of the will might relate to occult symbolism, as it is common to attribute the will to one of our four primal elements, in this case, fire, or as it's symbolized in the tarot, the wand, and the whole suit of wands. As any Hermetic practitioner may know, wands are traditionally constructed of wood. Wood, of course, comes from trees, a living, breathing aspect of the natural world. I think we could relate this to those desires we spoke of. They're like inborn into us. We can't just change them. They're natural. Our wants and our desires are natural. Likewise, a tree grows naturally according to its own necessity, working diligently and slowly, but capable of unseating concrete and other obstacles to reach the sun, even though it never touches the sun. Just so, a tree is more or less helpless against fire should it come to consume it, and the skillful direction and conscious use of this element of fire is one of the defining characteristics of what it means to be human. Thus, desire or will, like fire, desire can be directed towards constructive ends, like cooking our food, or making creepy crawlers, easy bake oven, or burning down the house. Usually in rapid succession to each other.
Love that song.
So, in the tarot, the will or fire consumes the wood and is inextricably linked to the wood being an analogy for desire, the skillful direction of being creative or destructive.
I like this because it's not just action and motion, it's also purpose.
Which is why the symbolism in the tarot is so useful. It does connect to actual philosophy.
Like the tree is growing towards something like the sun to gain sustenance in life, but at the same time, a forest fire can decimate and kill the tree, even though the desire is to be close to the fire.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Or the
that's
sun,
why
I
an
guess.
animal runs from the forest fire and why a human being can wield a branch on fire. So to an animal,
Ah.
their want is like, it just, you know what I mean? They don't have like a conscious...
It's driven by survival. Yeah.
But humans have this
It's driven by
extra-
unconscious.
Like we have a special relationship to our wants, and it's that special relationship that Steiner's going to be expressing, especially what it has to do with what it means to be free, is what makes us human. It's what gives us our creative,
Right.
godlike capacity. In so much as like in myths where, you know, Prometheus gives us the fire, which makes us more like the gods.
Yeah, it's like sentience, the ability to, think about those kind of processes and your choices in a way that animals can't. Yeah.
So now you have to be sentient while taking out the trash, you see.
Oh, man.
Unless you're a robot.
No, it's even worse for the robot. That's what Steiner's taught me during my studies this week.
I am very afraid for the robot uprising now. You're making me nervous.
So, at this point in the text, Steiner gives example after example of how modern philosophers and thinkers tend to ignore the human reflective capacity, the quality of human awareness. He says that, he illustrates that they just leave it out, most of these people, as they're discussing freedom and what freedom means.
He says, quote, that an action of which the agent does not know why he performs it cannot be free goes without saying. But what about an action for which the reasons are known, unquote.
And here's where the unspoken factor of Spinoza's nature of necessity starts to poke its head out and come to light in its importance. What exactly is the determining factor? What is the determining motive of the will? Is it purely our programming, or is it something more? If it's not something more, then we could be doomed to a cycle where we do not even have the freedom to want or the ability to want due to a lack of freedom. Freedom here would be an illusion. In my opinion, this again ties back into Thelema through the statement, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This statement has caused quite a bit of stir in and of itself for anyone that blindly associates the will and want as being synonymous. It's often mistakenly read instead as do what you want. If we take into account what Steiner is saying, then we would see a difference between simply doing as you want and doing as you will.
I just wish I could shout this to the whole internet that for Thelemites,
Yeah.
they're such nerds, they don't even believe in doing what you want. They're like,
Actually, it's not even ontologically possible.
So as we were kind of hinting at before, animalistically doing whatever you want requires only the freedom to do it, but doing so lacks the conscious awareness of where that desire came from. Awareness for Steiner, it makes all the difference. Having conscious awareness of the will, what motivates the desire, and how it connects to a deeper aspect of yourself is the liberating quality, according to Steiner. By the free space that this offers, actions have the ability to be freed from unconscious motivators, which would be connected to just wanting.
do you think Cookie Monster knows why he wants cookies?
Now, what starts with the letter C?
Do you think if he knew why it would ruin cookies for him? And if you knew that
maybe.
it would ruin cookies for him, do you have the right to inform him about why he wants cookies if you in fact yourself know why he wants the cookies?
Just imagine
What?
Cookie Monster in a relationship. His partner's like, you know what your problem is? You only want cookies because they're sweet and you get a dopamine fix. And you'd be, what?
It's because you miss your mother, Cookie Monster. Your mother was sweet. She used to make you cookies when you got home from school and all the other Muppets were bullying you. You miss your mother, Cookie Monster. And then he never eats a cookie again. And Cookie Monster dies because that's what he lives
Mommy.
on.
He's just like in the corner crying. See you is for cookies.
Because he wants to want
C is for
cookies
mama's
again.
love.
But he can't want the cookies anymore because now he knows the root of his desire. So you really have to be careful unplugging people from the Matrix.
C is for compulsion.
Oh, actually, if you do successfully do your shadow work and amend the trauma that you went through, because trauma does drive a lot of your desires as an adult, and they can be unhealthy desires as well. But if you're successful in your shadow work, you actually will stop wanting to do those things. And it's not that you force yourself or that you know that it's wrong, because you can already know that beforehand. But when you process your trauma properly, you actually will lose the desire to do the negative thing.
I love that you just brought this up, because there is a distinction of becoming aware of the programming or just following the programming and staying unaware of it. And that absolutely has to do with the process of shadow work.
Well, I think what you're talking about, Heka Astra, is technically deadly to Cookie Monster because that's his name, really. He's a monster for what? Cookies. Without the monstrous, abominable desire for cookies, there is no Cookie Monster. So
These are people that make their whole personality their trauma.
I'm telling you, C is for compulsion.
but if C is for consciousness, then Cookie Monster may disappear. He may be banished.
Maybe he will become a better Cookie Monster.
I don't think you know what you've done. Now, this is my favorite part of the text because Steiner pushes us down the rabbit hole of thinking.
Not just thinking, the integral act of thinking about thinking.
Thinking about thinking?
Thinking about thinking.
I'll be honest, sometimes I hear the word object or subject in these conversations, and my mind spins like the wheel of fortune and then starts smoking.
Oh yeah, that happened to me a few times in the text. Like, you know, when you are thinking about something that's not able to be thought about, and you think about it so long that your brain kind of like does the automatic shutdown reboot thing. You're back where you started.
Those are the words that cause the reboot, is object and subject. It's just, my brain turns off.
It just reminds me of when you say a word too much or you think of a word too much that it starts to sound funny and loses its meaning to you.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's in the book. Quote, "For without the recognition of the thinking activity of the soul, it is impossible to form a concept of knowledge about anything, and therefore of knowledge about an action. When we know what thinking in general means, it will be easy to get clear about the role that thinking plays in human action," unquote.
Sounds complicated? It isn't. Thinking. It's actually kind of a big deal.
You think?
So at this point, Steiner feels the need to expose to ourselves how we think about thinking and why that is inherently flawed. Typically, we tend to view thinking as the thoughts that we have without much else added to it. But he delves into the territory of understanding the underlying catalysts of our thoughts, what makes us think what we think. And now we get to think about thinking for a while.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Quote, "However we approach the matter, it becomes more and more clear that the question of the nature of human action presupposes that of the origin of thinking. I shall, therefore, turn next to this question," unquote.
So it's here where the nature of our actions and what it has to do with our hearts and minds sets the stage and the tone of the events of our thoughts.
Quote, "Every experience is a riddle. We see that from the egg there emerges a creature like the mother animal, and we ask the reason for the likeness. We observe a living being grow and develop to a certain degree of perfection, and we seek the underlying conditions for this experience. Nowhere are we satisfied with what nature spreads out before our senses. Everywhere we seek, we call the explanation of the facts." Unquote.
This is kind of fun because this process is kind of what all philosophy is based on. Just seeing something or being presented with a concept and wanting to know, that desire for knowledge.
Which is why, and I'm gonna make it my personal mantra, I want to give people stuff to think about more than I want to tell them what to think.
Hear, hear.
Oh yeah.
And likewise, if you'd like to continue this journey with us through Rudolph Steiner's The Philosophy of Freedom, where we get into the formation of the ego.
What exactly it means to think about thinking.
Monism versus dualism.
We're going to talk about materialism. The Big Bang's going to come up. I'm probably going to yell at Heka about Einstein.
Okay.
And if that weren't enough, we're going to talk about tarot cards and hobos and pheasants.
Yeah.
So if that sounds interesting to you, please check out www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you the extended edition of this episode, it'll get you the extended edition of
All of our episodes, pretty much doubling the content of the whole Reddit.
But not only that, I'll send you a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker for our Big Bunny bathroom cover art, and you'll get the secret keys to our Discord server,
Where you could talk to us about your Austrian-style philosopher, pinky in the air, sauerkraut,
Buttered sausage.
fancy mustard thoughts.
I am a sucker for philosophy, so please, anybody who wants to talk to me about it, just have at her in the Discord.
Where it comes from, what it does.
I need more practice. I used to love talking about it, but now it's making my head spin.
Woo!
But in a good way.
we're getting old. This is the age where we're supposed to decide what we think, because it's already been decided, and then yell at other people that they don't think the way we do. That's what we do now.
I'd rather not.
Thank you, everybody.
Get off my lawn!
Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew pew pew.
Pew pew.